Sometimes when we think about the world that we live in, we think that it's very different than the times of Jesus. And the reality is it's not. It's very common in Jesus' day, as it is now, that people actually saw themselves and valued themselves based on the things they did, activity. It was always about activity. And in a household, the women would have been expected to be caring for and presenting hospitality to the guests who come. So in this regard, the fact that Martha and Mary are both part of the household, and yet Martha is the one doing all the serving and Mary sitting at home, and at Jesus' feet, is problematic. And I think for us, it's very similar. We think in our society, and our society has taught us this, it's about all the work we can do. It's all about the busyness. How busy, how complete can our day be? How filled can our day be, right? So, people ask you all the time, how was your day? And what do you say? Well, it was busy, right? Geez, it was a busy day. Oh, man, I had lots of work to do today. Oh, I got a lot accomplished. We don't even realize it, but we use language that sort of is almost expected for people to hear from us, because if you say anything else, how was your day? Well, I didn't do anything. I just sat around and watched TV, right? People immediately jump to a conclusion that, you are just fluffing off, right? Or, well, I just sat in the sun and, worked on my tan, right? And it's strange because we're really concerned about this. Even when we go on vacation, don't you ever hear it said when people return from vacation, boy, man, I need a vacation just from the vacation I took, right? Because when we go away, we don't even know that when we're away or when we change our environment, that it is okay to slow down. It is okay to stop. It is okay to do nothing. It's okay to do nothing. But our society doesn't value that. And as such, you and I, we get stuck running this, hamster wheel of life where we just keep moving and moving and moving because it's expected of us to do so. And I just want us to sort of catch that for a moment and ask, have you made a very clear decision that the value of how society sees us, how society puts an enormous amount of pressure and value on of being accomplished, of doing things, have you actually made a choice for yourself that this is how you want to live your life? Or have you simply bought into the fact that everyone sees it that way? Everyone talks like that, and so automatically you do the same thing. You just follow through. Because I think as people, and honestly as Christians, I think it is really important for us not to judge and follow and lead lives that society says we should be leading, but rather also how Jesus would want us to be valuing life. See, whoever set up the secular side of it and has us running through and going through the hamster, cage, I think for the rest of us, it's okay to question whether or not there's any value there, right? I also say in this regard, it has a lot to do with prayer as well. And there's a transition that I like to make now, because people come all the time and they end up saying, well, I read the scriptures and I listen to sacred music and, I pray novenas, or I'm really big on the rosary, or well, okay, you're busy. You're definitely busy in prayer, definitely busy. And somehow we think that God, creator, omniscient, forever, eternal, somehow God needs our activity to appease him or to make us, we do it because it makes us feel as we are more desirable by God because of the work that we're doing. And when people ask me all the time, how should we pray? I point out this gospel. It's really this simple. Mary's not doing anything. She is sitting on her butt next to Jesus and is simply in his presence. And Jesus praises her for the accomplishment. She praises her for not getting caught up with all the externals of what should be expected of her as as a woman in her culture, in her society, and instead recognizes that Jesus is present. She recognizes Jesus is present. And because of that recognition, she chooses to act in a way that is contrary to what everyone else thinks or feels or decides what she should be doing. And then her sister, who doesn't feel that way, who feels that it's more important to be fulfilling the hospitality because the society guidelines and restrictions and regulations should be first and foremost, even above the presence of the Son of God. But in her mind, that's where she is. That's what she thinks. And so she ends up telling Jesus the authority here, right? Mind you, the authority. She's going to the authority and saying, hey, tell her to get off her butt and help me. You know, I'm doing all the work. And Jesus will not strip away from Mary what has settled in her heart as to be the greatest value. And that is not that she's doing anything, not that she's trying to get Jesus' attention, not that in any way, shape, or form she's running through or jumping through any hoops, you know, in nothing. She simply is sitting in the presence of Jesus, and that is enough. And so for you and I, when did we get so confused to think that when we're in prayer, that we, one, somehow have to get Jesus' attention, which is a big one. People think that somehow we have to get God's attention. That God needs to sort of be flagged down to pay attention to me. And that somehow there are activities we need to go through to get into the presence of Jesus. And yet I would argue that the very thought, the very instant you have the thought that you want to be with Jesus and in his presence, that's already inspired by the Spirit. It's already been done. The inspiration's already there. You're immediately in his presence. There's nothing else that you need to do from that point on. You don't need to convince him to be in your presence. I don't think we can have the desire to think about being in Jesus' presence without Jesus himself, through his Spirit, leading us to do that. So our days, and you know, the concern that I have is that sometimes we are so gymnastic about our prayer life, about our spiritual life, that it's exhausting. It's exhausting. Because we never think we've done enough. We never think we're finished. We always think that there's more required. We always think that, you know, we have to, that it goes on and on and on. And I'm not sure whether or not it's really already portrayed here for us. And Luke's already captured the scene where Mary is simply sitting at Jesus' feet. Just sitting and listening. And it doesn't mean that Jesus was a babble mouth, that he was sitting there talking, and she was there. But she was simply aware of his presence, in his presence, and whatever fell from his lips was enough to inspire her, you know, and she wanted more of that. And for us, I think there is this invitation to stop doing the hamster in the treadmill thing and sort of reflect on the scriptures and what happens in the life of Jesus. And clearly in this instance, in this situation, in this circumstance, Jesus highlights the fact and applauds Mary for not getting caught up in recognizing that Jesus is present. And the simplicity of that statement drives her activity just to sit there. But I can tell you what's going to happen. You and I are going to try and do this, and we're going to become very uncomfortable because we're going to feel as though there's something we should be doing. We're going to feel as though there is some sort of creation that we should be performing. There should be some sort of activity that we should be performing. God cannot be happy with just this. We have to be doing more. We should be reading, 6 chapters of the Bible every day. Really important. We should really get that down, right? I'm going to discipline myself to do that. Well, that's wonderful if it drives you into the presence of Jesus and brings you there. Otherwise, it's just a tool, and congratulations, you now know 6 chapters more of the Bible than you did before. But it doesn't mean that it brought you any closer or a connectedness to Jesus. What happened to simply recognizing that the creator of all things is simply there already in his presence? I sometimes think that we think that God, needs us to be working because somehow God has finished God's work. That somehow God's done, and now it's our turn to try to catch up to and to be in God's presence and to do all the work we need to do because God's already just simply still. God's finished, complete, still, and now we have to be running toward him. And yet at the same time, if you've paid any attention this week to the news, there's some pretty profound stuff going on that talks all about how God is far from being over or finished yet. Arthur, give me the first slide. So this is the Wells telescope. The Wells telescope was launched by NASA a number of years ago. It is actually designed to operate in minus 360 degree weather. It is meant and works best at minus 360 degrees or better. It takes 3 months for it to unfold to the full form that it's in right now. And the next slide. This is the first picture that has come back from it. It is now 1.5 kilometers away from Earth, over 1 million miles away. And what you're looking at right now is one simple little segment. The way it was described is if you take a grain of rice and you take it and you hold the grain of rice up against the sky, this is the picture that you would get. But I want you to note something. All of these are all galaxies. And all on the outskirts here, you see the red ones? That's where new galaxies are being created. God is continuing to create. God continues to create. And now we have this picture, this glimpse, that the universe isn't done. We thought it was stagnant. We thought it was created and there were limitations and that's it. And what we know now is that every single one of these is just like us in our Milky Way galaxy. There are literally tens and tens and tens of thousands. And yet on the outskirt here, the red ones, these are all new. These are all new creations coming into play. The activity of Genesis that we understand that God created the world, created us, and made us part of it, it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. And I find it very exciting that God would give humanity the gifts and the talents and the knowledge to create such a telescope that could go out. And I find it equally profoundly exciting that what it shows us is God's continued grace, God's continued growth, God's continued creation. So if the universe is not done, if God's not done with the universe, then God clearly isn't done with us as a human race. God's not done here. But here's the other question. If we're one of these, if we're just simply one, and there's an earth, and then there's all of us, and you have all these other ones, two things are possible, right? One is that in some galaxy, in some other section, there are other creatures that God has created. We have not encountered any of that in all of our time. We don't have any clear signs of aliens, And now go back to the other one, please. Aliens and the like. If that's the case, that this exists and continues to grow out, and we're the only created species of our type, how precious are we in God's eyes? Why hasn't God replicated humanity in any of these? Why haven't we heard from them? Why haven't we heard from them? Is he the one that hasn't happened yet? Or maybe we are the epitome of God's creation. That as much as God creates and continues to expand the universe, maybe we are the pinnacle of his creation. And maybe Jesus' activity coming to earth is really meant to be just that for us, so that we would be connected to that which is still creating the universe and still also ultimately creating us. The energy, the power, the creativity that's required to continue to have the universe. And remember, this is just one grain of rice picture of the universe. This is just one grain of rice. Arthur, show me the next one, please. Here's another picture from a different segment. Every single one of these little dots are stars. Every single one of those stars has planetoids running around it just like ours. God continues to expand and to grow, and we haven't heard of anything else. We don't know of anything else at the moment. We have no idea. It's either it's an amazing waste of space, or that God really felt that we were the epitome. We were the greatest part of his creation. And yet you and I, we somehow think that we're not important, we're not special, that we got to jump through hoops to get God's attention, that God's not listening, all this other stuff. And yet at the same time, we're it. We seem to be the culmination of God's greatest work. And to think that God, represented in Jesus, wants us to be in relationship with him, I'm not sure there's anything we can really say. What do we say sitting with the creator of all things, whose power continues to create, whose power continues to expand the universe? And we think that this God needs us, and yet it's simply an invitation that you and I can respond to. So we're paying attention to the gospel about sitting at the feet of Jesus, but in and through Jesus, all of this is being created, and that creator wants us to be in relationship with him. That's good news. It's really just good news. And so, as this telescope continues to float around out there and continues to travel, we'll see more and more pictures. These are but the first two that were sent back. We'll see more and more pictures of a galaxy unfolding and a galaxy continuing to be created. The fact that God's not done yet, and God continues to show his power and has allowed us the ability to see this and experience this as a human race, it's pretty wonderful. God bless you.